Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, our focus is squarely on the Indo-Pacific, a really critical area of global activity. We'll be guiding you through the latest source material covering the past week's key developments.
We aim to provide a calm, professional look at the military movements, the diplomatic meetings, and the political shifts involving major players like the U.S., China, and North Korea.
Our mission here is to offer an unbiased analysis, pulling together facts and different viewpoints from a wide range of international sources.
Well, exactly, helping you understand these complex geopolitical alignments and, why they really matter for global security today.
Okay, let's dive right into the South China Sea. Tensions there remain, well, quite high. We saw a specific incident last week, October 19th, involving an Australian aircraft.
That's right. It was an Australian P-8A Poseidon, their top anti-submarine surveillance plane. It flew into airspace over the Shisha Islands, the Paracels, which China claims.
And the Chinese reaction.
Pretty swift. The PLA Southern Theater Command tracked it, monitored it, and used warning maneuvers to essentially push it out of the area.
China's perspective was that Australia was acting provocatively, sort of aligning with U.S. interests.
Yes. And speaking of the U.S., at the same time, the USS Nimitz carrier group, with 3 destroyers, was operating nearby.
Conducting those freedom of navigation operations, maintaining that presence.
Standard procedure for the U.S. Navy, but always a point of friction. Meanwhile, China had its own carriers, the Shandong and the newer Fujian, positioned down at Hainan Island.
So it really paints a picture of sustained, high-stakes naval presence from both sides.
Definitely. It's not just about showing up. It's about continuous operations in a contested zone.
Now, this brings us to a concerning development operationally. On October 26th, there were 2 separate crashes involving U.S. Navy aircraft from the USS Nimitz.
Yes, an MH-60R Seahawk helicopter and an FA-18F Super Hornet fighter jet. Both went down during routine operations in the South China Sea.
The critical detail first. Were the crews okay?
Thankfully, yes. All 5 crew members involved across both incidents were recovered safely. Investigations are underway, of course.
That's good news. But 2 crashes on the same day. That's significant, isn't it?
It is. And some sources, like the China Times and NetEase News, were quick to point out that the USS Nimitz is, one of the older carriers in the fleet.
And the aircraft models, too.
Right. They're not the latest generation. This inevitably raises questions about equipment age, maintenance, especially with ongoing budget pressures.
So the potential implication is that there's a tangible risk factor here, combining older equipment with the high operational tempo.
It certainly suggests that. It adds a layer of complexity to maintaining readiness right there on the front lines of this competition.
Okay, before we shift to diplomacy, we do want to acknowledge our sponsor. This deep dive is generated by Stylo News, the AI-powered news application, and brought to you by ProWave AI.
Now, thinking about the region, these naval incidents directly impact neighbors like the Philippines.
Their chief of staff, Romeo Bronner Jr., had a very pragmatic take, didn't he?
He did, basically saying their location near Taiwan and major sea lanes means they'd be a target regardless of whether U.S. bases are present or not. It's just geography.
And their strategy to handle this risk is quite interesting, this disclosure strategy.
Yes, the Philippine Coast Guard is actively filming and publicizing what they describe as aggressive Chinese actions, for example, near Scarborough Shoal.
And it seems to be working.
It appears so. It's rallied domestic support and gained significant international attention and backing. It's a smart use of transparency.
But China sees this differently, naturally.
Of course. Beijing views the U.S.-Philippine security cooperation, including things like missile systems, as direct interference in what they consider their sovereign territory and affairs. They've demanded removal of those systems.
All right, let's pivot from the military side to diplomacy. A major event was the 47th ASEAN Summit in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, from October 26th to the 28th.
A very significant gathering. You had key world leaders attending, U.S. President Donald Trump, Chinese Premier Li Qiang, the EU's Antonio Costa, quite the lineup.
And a notable development for ASEAN itself.
Yes, Timor-Leste is officially set to join as the bloc's 11th member. That's a big step for regional expansion.
We also saw Japan's new Prime Minister, Sanai Takaichi, making her international debut there.
And her focus was immediately clear. Strengthening security ties with regional partners, particularly mentioning the Philippines, to counter China's assertiveness.
Now, President Trump's activities during this trip were also significant in Kuala Lumpur.
Focused heavily on trade. He signed agreements covering critical minerals and general commerce with Malaysia, Cambodia, and Thailand.
The stated goal being.
Twofold, really. Deepen trade relationships, obviously, but also to consciously diversify supply chains, moving them away from such heavy reliance on China. Local reception seemed positive.
Then he moved on to Tokyo.
Right. On October 28th, meeting Prime Minister Takaichi, they announced a new golden age for the U.S.-Japan alliance.
Reaffirming security cooperation.
Absolutely. And crucially, they finalized a deal on rare earth supply to ensure U.S. industries have access to those vital materials.
So, amidst all this attention from the U.S. and China, what's the collective approach from ASEAN itself? It sounds like a difficult balancing act.
It absolutely is. They're trying to, walk that tightrope. The main goal is managing disputes peacefully, through dialogue. Finalizing the South China Sea Code of Conduct with China remains a top priority for them.
So keep the dialogue going with China. Maintain those vital economic links.
Exactly. But at the same time, they need security assurances, which often leads them towards partnerships with the U.S. and its allies.
They really don't want to be forced into choosing one side over the other.
Precisely. That's the fear of being caught in the middle of a superpower rivalry, which they see as destabilizing for the entire region.
Okay, let's shift focus north now to the Korean Peninsula. North Korea became active again.
Yes, on October 22nd, they launched a ballistic missile, their first test in about 5 months. It flew about 350 kilometers northeast.
The timing just before the APEC summit seemed pointed.
Widely interpreted as a deliberate provocation, yes. And that wasn't all. Just 2 days later, on October 24th, they announced successful tests of new hypersonic missile systems.
Hypersonic, capable of carrying nuclear warheads. That's a significant technological step.
It is. And what's also striking is how these programs are reportedly being funded.
Through cybercrime, right. The figure was quite large.
Staggering, really. Reports suggest North Korean hackers have stolen at least $2.8 billion in cryptocurrency over just the last 2 years.
$2.8 billion.
Specifically earmarked to fund the nuclear and missile development. It really underscores the challenge traditional sanctions face when illicit funds can be raised this way, sort of bypassing the global financial system.
And North Korea isn't just acting alone militarily. They're deepening ties elsewhere.
Very much so, particularly with Russia. Foreign Minister Cho Son-hui has visits planned to Moscow and Minsk, and there are credible reports of North Korean troops and equipment being sent to support Russia in Ukraine.
Now, against this backdrop of renewed testing and deeper alliances, we saw President Trump bring up the possibility of meeting Kim Jong-un again.
Yes, on October 25th, he publicly stated he was open to meeting Kim at the Demilitarized Zone, the DMZ, during his Asia trip. This naturally revived talk of direct leader-to-leader diplomacy.
But after the breakdown of previous talks, like in Hanoi, is this just talk, or is there a substantive policy shift potentially happening here?
The language suggests this possible shift. The key phrase was Trump acknowledging North Korea as a sort of nuclear power.
A sort of nuclear power. That's quite different from demanding complete denuclearization.
Exactly. It hints at a more, perhaps, pragmatic approach, maybe prioritizing a nuclear freeze, stopping further development and testing, rather than holding out for complete, verifiable, irreversible dismantlement, which has proven incredibly difficult.
And that change in rhetoric directly impacts South Korea's long-held position.
It does. Seoul understandably remains cautious. They're wary of any U.S.-North Korea talks that might sideline them, and they continue to officially insist that complete denuclearization has to be the final goal.
Okay, let's try to synthesize this. Based on the past week, what are the likely next steps or strategies for the key players involved? China first.
China's approach seems consistent. Assert sovereignty robustly, like expelling the Australian aircraft, continue significant naval deployments, and frame U.S. actions as provocative interference. Maintain that narrative.
And for the U.S. and its allies.
The focus is clearly on maintaining freedom of navigation. The Nimitz patrols, the Australian flights are examples. Strengthening alliances is key, like the Golden Age talk with Japan and the ASEAN trade deals, and possibly adjusting diplomatic posture, especially regarding North Korea, towards maybe more achievable goals.
And for the Philippines and the wider ASEAN group.
Their strategy appears to be leveraging transparency, that disclosure tactic we discussed, to build international support. Also enhancing their own defense capabilities where possible, and crucially, keeping the diplomatic channels open, pushing for that code of conduct with China to manage tensions.
It's interesting how different sources framed these events, too.
Yes. quite clearly. You saw the Global Times linked to the Chinese state, justifying the response to the Australian plane as necessary defense.
Whereas Western outlets,
Newsweek, for example, emphasized the U.S. presence as vital for regional security. And outlets closer to the situation, like Rappler in the Philippines, really highlighted the diplomatic and, frankly, physical challenges faced by countries like the Philippines caught in the middle.
what about the broader public conversation, say, on social media?
Looking at platforms like X, formerly Twitter, the sentiment regarding China's actions in the Pacific is predominantly negative in the English-speaking sphere, maybe 70–80%.
Driven by concerns over sovereignty and perceived aggression.
Primarily, yes. Hashtags like hashtag South China Sea, hashtag PLA, hashtag Taiwan show a lot of concern. There are pro-China voices, maybe 10–25%, arguing defensive necessity or economic benefits, but they're largely outnumbered online.
And North Korea.
Overwhelmingly negative sentiment there too, around 70–85%, reacting to the missile tests and Kim Jong-un. Lots of fear, calls for sanctions. It reflects a real global anxiety.
So as we wrap up, what should listeners keep an eye on in the near future?
Well, first, the results of those U.S. Navy investigations into the aircraft crashes. The findings could impact operational procedures and fuel the debate about maintaining older military hardware.
Diplomacy outcomes, too.
Definitely. Watch for concrete details emerging from the Trump-Xi and Trump-Takaichi meetings, specifically around security guarantees in those trade agreements, especially the rare earths deal.
And the wild card.
The potential Trump-Kim meeting, any official confirmation or movement towards that would be major news. Right now, it's just speculation based on Trump's comments.
One last factor.
Just keeping an eye on the weather. We're still in a period where tropical disturbances in the South China Sea could develop into typhoons, adding a natural hazard layer to an already complex situation.
Now, the analysis and synthesis you've heard today were put together using Stylo News' AI engine.
That's right. This technology processes information from over 250 diverse global sources, traditional news, social media like X, translating and analyzing it all to provide these multidimensional insights quickly. It goes far beyond just reading headlines.
For continued access to AI-powered news briefs like this one and global intelligence tailored to your needs, you can subscribe to Stylo News. Just visit www.stylonews.com.
Thank you for tuning in today and joining us for this deep dive into some very complex global events.
We appreciate you listening. Please do follow Stylo News on your favorite social media platform to stay updated. We'll be back next time with another deep dive.